Hello everyone, welcome back. This one is going to involve some water, some trees, and reflections. And so let's get started. As usual, make sure you have your brush, your water, and some paper towels. I'm going to start off by, if you have a pencil, it would be good to do a light sketch with your pencil, the area in which you want to paint, right? So I'm just going to make 2 dots and just connect them roughly. So I can get a good sense of the rectangle. Doesn't have to be perfect, just so you get a good sense of where you're going to paint. Okay. So now, I'm going to start off by wetting this area, not with paint, but with just water. And again, this technique would be called wet on wet. I'm just going to wet the paper first. There you go. Just do a really thin layer. You really don't need that much. There you go. And so now we are going to start painting the sky and the reflection of the sky here, and then some trees and the horizon line over here. So you have to work pretty quickly before the paper dries. I'm going to get some blue over here. And just start off with the edge. Yeah, a bit more there. I'm going to make the top a bit darker. And I'm going to also do it here too. And then gradually start adding more blue. And you notice that I'm not painting some of the areas for the cloud effect. There you go. Same thing over here. Just fading out a little bit. Something like that. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and start with the trees. Because fall is upon us now, and fall could also mean the falling of leaves, the change of seasons, the trees changing colors, right? And so, yes, let's get started. I'm going to use some green over here and some yellow and some red here and there. But really, there's no right or wrong answer, right? You can follow along if you'd like. I'm going to use this green. Not turquoise green, but the green. And let's start this area over here. I'm going to add some yellow. Maybe I'll add some taller yellow trees here. More green. And some red. That should be good. Now, if you have too much paint around, I can also get some paper towel and kind of just dab it a little to get rid of the excess paint. There we go. And also, if you have a paper towel or a clean brush, what you can do actually is kind of paint the white lines to reflect the water, to mimic what the water is doing. So just like that. You notice it's kind of removing the paint. You can do that as well. Gonna do this here. There you go. It's also adding some nice textures, actually, which is nice. Okay. And so now we are going to have to let this dry a little bit, because if I keep adding watercolors right now, it's going to keep smearing and be the wet on wet technique. So now we have to wait until we get to the wet on dry technique. But while we're waiting, I'm gonna just add a few touches just to make sure it's kind of blended a bit more here. Now we just have to wait. All right, so welcome back. It is almost dry now, so I think we can actually get started with the details. And for the details, we'll be using the wet on dry technique, right? So that's why we had to wait until the paper was dry before we continue. So as usual, I'm going to get my brush and water and start by getting the details of the trees. And I really want to get a really nice point on the brush for this so that we can get as much detail as we want here, right? And so now I think we can get started. I'm going to use I'm going to start by using burnt sienna to get a thin line across the painting, just to make sure that we differentiate between the sky and the water. Make it as thin as possible, just like that. And then from here, we can start adding, making sure all the details are on the top, but leaving the bottom, right? So that we can see where the reflection starts. I'm going to add some red and get started. If the brush feels too wet, you can just kind of dab it on the paper towel a little bit. And you notice that I'm trying to get a more textural effect, right? By using like the side of the brush, making sure it's not too wet. You can also maybe try out the dry brush technique here if you'd like. From here, I think I'm going to start adding some yellow. I know that you guys don't have orange, so instead of getting an actual orange color, you can just use yellow, kind of just mix it in the middle, right? So I'm also going to try to use the colors that are seen here a bit more here. So I wouldn't add green here just because there isn't that much green here in the water reflected, right? There we go. Gonna keep going, this time with green. And we'll see how this works. Make sure there isn't too much paint or water. Get more. And end with some yellow on this side. And lastly, for the details, I'm going to add some burnt sienna and actually a little bit of blue just to make it a bit darker, right? So this is burnt sienna. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to just show you here. Burnt sienna. And then if you add blue to it, it's going to naturally make the color darker. And this could be a good technique to use for shading instead of using straight black. Because if you just use black, then it doesn't look as natural. So I'm going to get some of this brown and kind of just get it on the bottom. To kind of mimic the bottom of trees, right? So like bark. Just adding some lines to kind of mimic trees. Maybe with some black, I could add a tiny sense of birds flying. And then, of course, they would have to be reflected here as well. Just very lightly. I'm gonna just add some darker lines here, just to make sure that we can tell that they're trees. And that's good. And that's the painting. I hope you enjoyed painting with us. This scene, when I look at it, represents fall in the way the colors reflect on the water as the colors of the leaves change from green to yellow to orange and red. And it also reminds me that I should start wearing sweaters and scarves to prepare myself for the cool weather ahead. Thank you so much and take good care.